This episode of the Old Boy Podcast is with Ryan Villopoto, four-time world champion Supercross Motocross. This guy from 2011 to 2014 absolutely dominated the sport. He started at 5 years old, tells us that whole story about coming up, some great investments that he made in his career and himself that really helped him get to that pinnacle and that next level. And now we talk about life after the bike. He's working with NBC Sports. Ricky Carmichael and him have an awesome podcast, and he is coaching and watching his two 7-year-old sons follow down the same path as him. I hope you enjoy.
Man, do you hear that? Look at here. They're coming. They're coming. We're going to have a party.
I'm talking good on barbecue.
Hey guys, welcome back and thank you for joining us for this episode of the Old Boy Podcast. I have my guest this episode as Ryan Villopoto, four-time AMA Supercross champ and now host of his own podcast over there with NBC Sports, which I think is pretty awesome. And just looking forward to talking to him about a little bit of his journey. What athletes go through when that whole retirement thing comes up, because he's not fully retired. I've been seeing him ride around here a little bit, but Ryan, good to have you on, man.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. Yeah, it's good to get in some other podcasts. Spread the word, spread the name, and help each other out.
Absolutely, man. Happy to do it. And me and you we were talking before we came on. Had a chance to meet at the 6 Hour Hunger Games a couple years back there in Evanston, Wyoming. That's a pretty, I had the easy part. I got to stay in camp and cook on the Traegers. But, dude, that was a pretty gnarly course they had you guys out there on. You want to tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, dude, it was. I got invited to come out and participate in that. And I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I don't train anymore. I'm not even in the gym whatsoever. So I'm like, no big deal. They said, it's about an 8-mile hike. Meanwhile, it was like 6,000 feet, and it happened to be like, I don't know, dude, it was 90 degrees out. It was hot as balls when we were there.
The funny part is the following year, it was totally different. It had sleeted and snowed, and they were out in those tents, bro. And it was like, dude, I remember some guys going, okay, so if we go get a hotel, we are DQ'd, that's gotten so bad. But I think everybody stuck it out. But that was a pretty wicked event. Like I said, I was happy to be the cooking guy that one, because I did get to go back to a nice warm cabin and it was good. But congrats on SIG though for putting on such a cool event. I think they just had another one out, and I think they moved it over to Montana this year. But
okay.
But yeah, that Evanston, I remember that year you were talking about. It was so hot.
It was hot. It was hot. I did the first day, I think it was like a 9-mile loop that we did, and it was timed too. So you kind of had to hustle. You couldn't just drag ass and drag feet, and mosey along. Everything you had to do was on foot, and it was timed from destination to destination, and then you had a timed area you had to shoot and so on. But I got back to the tent that first night, dude, and I'm like, I was ready to crack some beers, thinking when call it station 3. I'm like, okay, this is sick, this is cool. And by the time I got back, I'm like, dude, I just want to take a shower and go to bed. I was so wore out.
Because I got to do this shit again tomorrow too.
Dude, I know. It was gnarly. It was. So,
well, the other thing is too that the competitor comes out in you though, right? Because you walk in and you start looking at that group, and there's a UFC champ, there's a Super Bowl champ, motocross champ. Fuck, everybody here is a killer, dude. If I mail it in, I'm gonna look like shit.
Totally. Yeah, there was some heavy hitters out there. Like you said, some ex-Marine, ex-military, some footballs, baseballs, UFC fighters. So none of these guys were pussies, for sure.
No.
There was a couple that bailed. There was a couple that bailed maybe from some feet issues and this and that. But most of the guys made it, and it was gnarly. The competitive spirit came out, and you had to find our targets. Like I said, in that time, and then hustle to the next one. So we all want to win. Nobody wants to be a loser.
Yeah, it was funny. I was telling people, because sometimes you'll go to these events, and I know you've been to some of them where, you kind of show up and they kind of make it look a little more difficult than it is for, social media following, or it looks like this. I'm like, no, guys. I was like, they got content out of that, but No, dude, there was nothing put on. All those people were beat to hell by the time it was all said and done.
You are correct, man. It was like you said, they put the stigma out there like, oh, it's tough, and half the time it's not, or more than half the time it's not. This was legit, and this was tough. This was hard, like at least it was for me. I know some other guys too, but still, maybe nothing for some of those ex-Marines, but for me, I finished it, but it was tough.
You got it done, old boy.
Yeah.
So, hey, I want to talk a little bit, obviously, about your motocross career. One of the things, we really kind of push here on the podcast is just grit, hard work, determination, and all the different things, whether it be, blue collar trades. Just got done talking actually with some rodeo guys, like all different walks of life. But I feel like, these days, we kind of lose a little faith in humanity because, you got some real sorry asses out there, and a lot of people want things handed to them. But around here, we just like to let people know there's still plenty of us that have that same common thought that if you work hard enough, train hard enough at something, you can be great at something. And so kind of wanted to just dig in a little bit into your background. What brought you to motocross? Were you born? I mean, did you just start at a very young age and just fall in love with it? Because you had a real run of dominance in the sport that not many can claim.
Thank you. Yes, it was. I was basically born into it. So my grandpa is still around now. I think he's 86, New Jersey based, and was always racing cars, like street racing, just shit you'd do back when, when he was a teenager, and then moved out west, Arizona, had 2 motorcycle shops. My dad raced, my uncle, so my dad's brother, raced also. And then we ended up making our way up to like Northern California. I was born in Fortuna, California, and then and then we kept going. I moved out of Fortuna about one years old, and then went up to Paulsbo, Washington, is where I grew up to about 14 years old. But yeah, it's been in the family, but I'm the one that took it to that, to the very top. My dad was a decent local pro. It all stemmed from, obviously from my grandpa and then my dad, and my brother raced too. So it's been like 4th generation in our family for racing dirt bikes.
Well, and from what I saw on your Instagram, it looks like there's a 5th generation right around the corner.
Yeah, there is. The boys, I have twin boys. They're 7 years old. They'll be 8 in September. And yes, they're playing baseball, and they're racing dirt bikes. I'm trying to keep them active in the baseball scene, just to have a backup. I think I know where it's going, right? Just because that's what Dad did, and that's what they want to do. But it's I just want to keep them active in baseball, and then if they choose, when they're so let's say 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever that is, to go full time into moto, then we can do that. But if they choose to go baseball, there's no picking up the bat again. I mean, yes, you can in theory, but I want to keep them working, in that arena too, because if you get left behind, it's really hard to get back up there in the 10, 11, 12-year-old range to go out and start playing travel ball. So I want them to do both.
No, I agree. And also, thinking about it from that point of view too, I mean, it's like 2 different sets of friends too. You know what I mean? So they can meet some other people, some other coaches, you know what I mean? Like forge some other relationships, but besides just, and I feel like, and good on you, because I feel like too many times, especially in a situation like yours, I'll see a 9-year-old kid and they're like, oh, he's just playing baseball. I'm like, has he ever played rec soccer? Did he ever play rec? You know what I mean? Like, no. Like, he's just been baseball. And I'm like, and a lot of times I think that's where sometimes too, you start seeing like, dude, 15-year-old kids shouldn't be having Tommy John surgery. Yeah, you know what I mean? But I feel like, and then once again, you start looking at those kids, and a lot of them are kids that have only played one sport. Whereas if you're playing multiple sports, you have a chance of training more muscles to where you just don't have that one set of muscles that's always taking the strain.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the other thing. I think if you start, I played soccer until about 10 years old, but not seriously. It was all moto. But what happens is your kid's burned out. Especially if you're doing the travel stuff, if you're chasing, the moto scene from Southern California all the way to Florida, because there's stuff in between. There is Loretta Lynn's is the biggest amateur national. It's in Hurricane Mills, Tennessee. Yeah. And they're all over the country. But if you you start pushing, which it's good. You need to push. You need to, you need to develop that thick fucking skin on them, because let's be honest, the world today is very soft.
Soft as shit.
Yep. So I totally agree with that. And that's why I'm doing it that way. But I also don't want them to be 12 or 13, 14, kind of like when I was. And not that I got burnt out, but I had a short career. I retired just as I turned 27.
Yeah.
And part of that is because I was going from 7, 8, 9 years old as a career, essentially, all the way up to, 26, 27 years old. So yes, as a profession, I can only turn pro at 16. So my professional stint was actually very short, pretty short. So I want to try to keep that longevity in them.
And it makes total sense. We were actually, in some of the discussions I've had with some of the rodeo guys and talking about their career, some of them are like, look, my dad would let me train, starting at 12 or 13, but he didn't let me really start competing until 16 or 17, because in the best situation for when you do turn pro, that you're taking that beating for a reason. You know what I mean? And instead of just, oh, well, let's just get them started young, let's go. You know what I mean? But running that crazy schedule is where I think, you can really start to put some wear and tear on the body at an early age.
Totally. I totally agree. And it's, a lot sometimes, and my dad was, I wouldn't say at fault for this, but part of my racing was probably a little of him living through me, pushing me. Yeah. But he also saw something. That's the biggest thing. Like he knew I could be good. So he saw something. And that's why he pushed so hard. I see some of these kids that maybe don't have the talent or don't have the work ethic or are just plain soft, right? And the parent wants it more than the kid and just pushes. And then it puts a strain on the relationship and things like that. When honestly, if you really looked at the information, what's in front of you, like it's a far-fetched dream for that kid to make it. And, and you're pushing on him so hard. And then like I said, the strain on the relationship once they get 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old can drive a wedge if you aren't careful.
Sure. Speaking of those young ages, so around, you said 9, 10 years old, is that when you started running obviously you can't be pro until 16, but is that when you start running a little heavier schedule than most kids your age?
Exactly. Yeah. So I even consider myself a little bit late in today's world. I didn't do my first amateur national till I think I was 10 years old ish. These kids now are starting there's a class 4 to 6 class, shaft drive PW class at Loretta's, and you can literally go and race at a high level at 4 years old. 4 years old.
That's wild. So, you're not even in kindergarten yet.
No. It's crazy.
Okay, so what kind of bike is that? Like how big is it? Like, is that like a lawnmower engine?
Yeah, so it's a little 2-stroke engine. It's a Yamaha platform. Yamaha builds it. It's called the PW50. It's a shaft driven bike. It's basically the smallest bike you can buy to get your kids. That's a real gas motorcycle. Yeah. It's the smallest one, starting gas motorcycle, Japanese made, Yamaha. And that's where you start. Honestly, that's where my kids started. That's where I started. And the crazy thing is it's still the same platform. Like my kids, when they had the PW50s a few years ago, it was the same platform and motorcycle that I had when I was 4 or 5 years old. So they really haven't, they've kept that thing in the production line for a very, very long time because it is a starter class, because you're only in it for a very short time. And then you move up to I call it the real 50 class. So it would be like KTM or Cobras or some other manufacturers out there that build more of the real race version 50s.
Well, it's like, when you're starting at that level, it's like we don't need to be driving a lot of technological innovation in the old starter bike. It's kind of like the Daisy Red Rider. Like, you don't need to get reinventing that gun. Like, she's
exactly
good. She's good for what she does, old boy. She gets you started.
Exactly. That's exactly what it would be equivalent to. Would be the Daisy, the Red Rider. The you're gonna shoot your eye out. You're gonna shoot your eye out, kid. It's that gun. Yeah.
I love it. So, leading up to your pro career, was there one amateur event that to you that you that you won where it was kind of like, you talked about your dad saw something in you? Like, is there one of those events or a period of time in your amateur career where you're like, okay, I'm fucking good at this. I've got a real chance of turning this into a career.
So I actually, I had a good amateur career. I would say there is kind of one race that sticks out to me. I got beat by a guy named Mike Alessi pretty much my entire amateur career from 60s to 80s. That's a stint of I think what the class has changed age brackets right now currently, but it used to be 7 to 11. And then the 80 class would be 12 to 13. So for many years I got beat. And I got beat and I got beat. And I learned how to lose, obviously, because I didn't win very often. So later in my 85 career, or 85, in the 85 class, we came to a race called, it was in Oklahoma. It was Ponca City is what the race was, is what the name of the race was. And that was literally the first time that I beat him straight up, was all over him, made the pass and won. I think it was good for me, but I also am my temperament, for whatever reason, a lot of the fire and the push came from my dad, which, it was really good because he kept me pushing forward. If it was up to me, I probably would have quit. You know what I mean? Throughout those years of racing, he gave me the option. He's like, if you want to quit, we'll go buy a fucking boat and I'll have a new truck and this and that, because he spent every dime on racing and getting me, and literally spent now he didn't mortgage the house and the farm like I've heard stories. He was very smart in that department. He was a spec builder. He built houses up in Washington, and but every dime that we had went to racing a dirt bike. And once I turned pro, I was at Loretta Lynn's. I turned pro I had just turned 17, and I signed my first contract with Kawasaki and Pro Circuit. That's when things really flipped, honestly. That is when it flipped. I went from being a second place guy pretty much my whole amateur career to going out and winning on one of the biggest stages right away.
And what do you attribute that to? Was it becoming part of a race team to where a little better equipment, a little better mentorship, or do you think it just, dude, I'm pro, I'm gonna go fucking make the best of this?
So I think part of that is now being on either better equipment or equal equipment. To call it Mike Alessi to the kid I was racing against. But then once you come in, you're also racing against 23, 24, 25-year-old. Some of the guys we raced against were 26 years old when I was 17, right? So totally, you're the mentality of a 20. I look back now, I'm 30, gonna be 36 in August. A 17-year-old kid, the mentality of a 17-year-old kid versus the mentality of a 24-year-old or 25-year-old.
Yes.
Man is so different.
Fearless.
And and here's the other thing. They're on their own. I was still living with my mom and dad. I didn't, they have to put food on the table. They have, mortgages, this, that, and the next. So when they were getting paid and the salary they were getting paid and the bonuses that, if they did well, dude, they would slit somebody's throat for that. Right. So at 17, you're like, oh, dude, I got a factory ride. I'm crushing it. This is awesome, because I was still a kid. So I think when I moved up, I just excelled when I got on the big bike really quickly.
I'm going to treat this shit like I stole it. Let's see if we can blow it up.
Exactly. So that was the big difference is being on equal equipment, having a good team around you, people that have been in the industry for a very long time. And knew how to pull that out of the riders.
All right, proud sponsor of the show, better damn well be Whiskey Bent BBQ. So this is a brand that Nicole and I started a little over a decade ago. You can find our rubs and seasonings in about 500 different retail locations throughout the U.S., Academy Sports, select Ace Hardwares, then obviously here at our store in Lakeland, Florida. If you want to go check it out, please feel free to. WhiskeyBentBBQ.com, and you can use my discount code OldBoyPodcast for 15% off. So for some of the people that maybe listen that aren't super familiar with motocross, supercross, when we talk about AMA championships, so and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's kind of like, people probably understand with like NASCAR. There's a circuit, there's a set amount of races. You get a certain amount of points for where you place, correct?
Yeah, so it's currently outdoors and Supercross. Supercross is all stadium based, so all football and baseball stadiums. Outdoors is on a big old piece of property, normally out of cities, out of towns, so where they have big, lap times 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Our lap time for a Supercross race is about 55 seconds. Summertime is outdoors, winter is Supercross. So you have a whole separate set of, conditions and weather. Supercross is normally pretty cold or cool. Outdoors can be up in upwards of 100, 105. And you got all your gear on and things like that. It's hot.
When given those extremes, did you like the big old field or did you like the stadium better?
Honestly, I liked both. I excelled in both. And by the time, because we have our total series when I was racing, currently it's changed a little bit. Our program's kind of changed currently, but when I was racing, it was 12 outdoors and it's 17 Supercrosses. If you're in the premier class, now if you're in the 250 class, which is kind of the starter, call it the starter class, you do 8 rounds of Supercross, but you still do 12 rounds of outdoors. So when I was 16, 17, 18, that was 8 rounds of Supercross, 12 rounds of outdoors. When I turned 450 and went up to the 450 class, which would have been 21, that's when the schedule is like, it really gets piled on. That's 17 Supercrosses and 12 outdoors. So you pretty much race year round.
Yeah. That's wild. Damn.
Yeah. So they keep it that way because of the call it the 250 class, the call it the starter class is what I'll call it. If those kids or those guys did 17 rounds of Supercross, there probably would be half of them would be hurt. It's just so much load on the body traveling, because we do 17 rounds and 18 weekends essentially is what it is. So you race 17 races in 18 weekends, and then you have 2 weekends off, and then you go straight to outdoors, and then you pretty much do the 12 outdoors in about 14 weekends, roughly. So it's a very busy schedule, and you have to have that maturity. You have to have that true grit type, and you don't get that, like I said, till you're 23, 24, 25, 26 years old. Yeah,
that's unreal. So I mean, and back then, are you doing any training, like as far as
yeah.
Okay, talk to me a little bit about that as far as the training and just kind of taking care of your body, because that is you talk about grind. I mean, that's a grind. I mean, good. I mean, I can't think of any other. Yeah, I mean, they play football games every weekend, but that's for 18 weekends and a training, maybe half a year. But I mean, that's running and gunning.
And the difference between that is you have a team to rely on. Right. Like if I showed up on an off day, or I tweaked my knee, or I hurt something on, like, yes, I have a team, but they're all on the sidelines. They're the mechanics, the truck drivers, and they're there to help. But when the gate drops, whatever injury or whatever you're dealing with, you have to push through that as the rider. So that's it's a very individual sport. So yeah, as for the training, the diet, like honestly, as an early professional, like 17, 18, 19, like, yes, I trained a lot of road biking, a lot of gym, but I kind of ate what I wanted to eat. I would call it, those were the golden years, meaning I was just kid power, call it.
Yeah. Metabolism at an all-time high.
Yeah, exactly. So then when I went up to the 450 class, I would have been 21 years old, I think, roughly, of what I would have been. That's when all of my weaknesses were exposed, from the training aspect and not having my shit together, essentially, to race at the highest level.
Yep.
And I had to clean up my diet, chicken, fish, no cheese, really no table bread. Only bread we would eat would be sandwiches, and that would be at lunchtime in between motos. So I hired a guy named Eldon Baker, worked with Ricky Carmichael, which was one of the best in our sports history. I was able to hire him. James Stewart had just parted ways with him. I was just coming back from a major injury. I'd blown out my tib, fib, and ankle. They put five plates and 20 screws in my lower foot and ankle. Yeah, and I was, I thought about retiring and collecting the insurance money. Ended up not doing that. Well, I got my phone rang and it's like, hey, one of my good friends and also sponsor was like, hey, Eldon's available. And I said, okay, let's sit down at the last national, which was out here in California at Paula. And I'm like, he's available. So I sat down with him. I was at the bottom of the barrel. Like I needed to do something. I needed to change my program if I wanted to succeed in the premier class. So I said, well, what's it going to take? It's going to take $300,000. I said, okay, to hire him. And I said, okay. I handshake deal right there. And I wasn't even riding yet. Like, I think I might've still been on crutches or limping around. And, so he took a gamble on me to a certain extent, not knowing if I was going to be 100% coming back from that injury. And I'm like, I looked at it because, my race bonuses wins were 100,000 a night. So I could, and then some other added on stuff, I could clear like, 130 to 150,000 a night. So I just looked at it. I was like, yes, it's a lot of fucking money, but I'm like, all I have to do is win 3 races.
Investment,
and I got the
baby.
dude paid off. Yeah. I got the dude paid off in 3 races. So I took a gamble. We did that. And I literally came back that next season, which was about 4 months from the start of Supercross. And I came out and won the opening night at Anaheim.
That investment in what he provided, obviously without giving away, the secret sauce, but like, what was it about it? Was it just another level of preparing your body, making sure everything that you took in, had a reason, was feeling like, looking back on it now, what do you feel like that big difference was?
Well, I think number one, it was my mentality changed when I knew I had the best trainer also in my corner, right? So that was a big, there was no second guessing. Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing too much? Am I not doing enough? What should I be doing? Right. I left that all up to him. That was his job. And then also just, I call it repetition. Like, we had a plan Monday through Friday and like essentially a 12-month plan. Like he had everything laid out. So there was no questioning, what are we doing today? What are we not going to do today? And he built up my lap count, like laps around the track during the week. Really started ground level. Like I said, I came off of a major injury. And when he got me, like I was literally, I wouldn't say fat, but I was out of shape. He thought we were in trouble when we first started working together. He's like, dude, this guy is a bag of dicks. I'm like, damn. Like, he really had to, he really questioned if he made the right decision at first, and he'll tell me. I've heard him say it, and he's like, but I know myself, I didn't like the training part of it. That's why I invested in him is to have him keep his thumb on me at all times. And my mentality changed knowing that I had the best trainer, knowing that I knew exactly what I was going to do. He had a track record of 10 championships prior to that. And all I had to do was essentially execute everything he said. Right. And I knew my capabilities were there to win if I did what he told me to do, essentially.
And then to go from being the proverbial bag of dicks to winning your first race out, that had to be such affirmation and almost just like throwing fucking diesel on a fire of like, okay, I thought all this, I just fucking proved all this. Nothing's going to hold us back. Let's rip.
Yeah, it totally was. It was like, honestly, dude, I think when we started, I was to put it into perspective, I was I'm about 180 right now. I was close to where I am right now when I started with him. And when I showed up at Anaheim 1, I was 150.
Damn.
So I cut all the fat off of me. I was just very efficient. And I had the talent. That was the one thing is I had the speed and I had the talent. I was missing the fitness and the mentality side and that part of it. It's very hard to, I think that's almost the easier part to develop is the fitness side. As long as you're willing to suffer, you can develop that. It's really hard to come up, and if somebody's really fit, and does everything and loves to train but has no speed's really hard to train and get. Like, that's something that, you tell somebody to like, dude, you need to shift up 3 gears and you're going 30 miles an hour. I need you to go 60. How do you get that, wrap that dude's head around going double as fast,
Yep.
But the training to me is easier, right? Like that is easier to develop somebody, getting somebody to either develop the talent or try to develop the speed. Those are the two that's the hardest things to develop. The fitness side was just do it, right? Just man up and do it, so
make it happen. That is a very good point though. The talent and the speed do seem very, very, very difficult to teach. Cause I'm sure too, just part of that just inherent, right? Like, yeah, you can push it further, but like, if you don't, pun intended, have that gear, it's hard for me to fucking create it for you.
It is. And scared, use the word scared, is if you're just not willing to push yourself to that limit. Let's go F1 drivers. Let's go MotoGP. MotoGP guys are doing 230, I think is what I just heard.
I was just at the
220.
I was just at the Indy 500 this weekend, and I'm like, dude, these guys do not give a fuck. Like, they're airing it out. You know what I mean? Like, it's unreal.
So think about that. Exactly. You were just at the Indy. It's like, okay, if somebody doesn't want to go around the turn 1 and 2 at let's call it 170 miles an hour because he's scared. Well, it's easy to get the guy to do it from the fitness standpoint. You just need to do, you need to do more. You need to do, these specific things, and I can get you fit. That's the easy part to develop. It's getting somebody's wrapping their head around. Hey, it's there's ruts that are on the dirt bike track that are 60 feet long, and 2.5 feet deep. I need you to hit that at, feet on the pegs and hit it at 45 miles an hour like everybody else. That's the hard part.
Yeah. And getting back to your career in just a second, but since you retired, I'm sure you've done some clinics, some teaching, some coaching. That has to be one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm trying to get this kid to do this. I don't want to get all up in his shit and just tell him, hey, dude, you're not right now. You're not good enough. You got to get better. You know what I mean? Like, that has to be some of the hard part of, especially these things too. Cause it's like, I think about it like equated to baseball, since we were talking about that earlier. Like, no, I can't make you more talented, but I can sure as hell make you stand in that batting cage and continue to throw you pitches till you fucking figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like motocross, that's a little tough to do. I mean, I guess you can keep saying we're going to run this course till you get it figured out, but that whole time that body's taking a hell of a lot more of a beating than, somebody standing in a batting cage, a couple of rips.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a repetition, and also I'll use baseball because I've been doing that, like you said, with the boys, and technique is the biggest thing. You need to develop technique before you develop speed or develop home runs or develop, technique is the biggest thing. And also technique is, in our world, translates also to safety, right? Like,
yes.
Let's be honest, our sport is, the only other sport I put into the equivalent of what we do, and I'm not, don't quote me on this, but bull riding would be very similar because you're there, you're on the bull, it's like riding a dirt bike. It essentially has its own, when that thing gets out of control or wants to do something, you have to be able to tame it down or combat it or make the right moves to save the crash or to stay on that bull. So there's very few sports like ours, and you have to do that. I know 8.5 seconds for bull riding, which is gnarly as hell. We do that we do it for 35 minutes in outdoors, and we also do it for 20 minutes in Supercross.
It's got to be exhausting when you get off that thing.
It is. It totally is. But the reward of winning surpasses that so much. But what is different too is we're on dirt, so meaning the terrain is ever changing, especially in Supercross. I will use as the example I'm going to use, because the track's only about 12 to 13 feet wide inside the stadium floor, the lanes that you ride in. So outdoors, it could be 25, 30 feet wide in some spots. So as the track gets nasty and gets ruddy and gets super choppy and shitty, you can move around. Well, Supercross, you're stuck inside of that 12 to 13 foot width of the track. So we'll get ruts that are foot peg deep. So now you're battling the racers, you're battling, the fitness side of it, the trying to go faster, trying to, either win the race or be on the podium, not make a mistake. And then also making sure that you're looking for other lines, because every lap the track is changing. Every single lap. If you hit one rut over here to the left and you were able to jump that 75-foot triple, no problem. You could literally come around 3 laps later, and that rut now that triple is unjumpable because that rut's too deep, and you'll catch the foot pegs off the takeoff. So you got to be thinking before. You got to be figuring out and thinking of what to do before you even have to.
Yeah, that's wild. And I mean, and being able to process and do all that at the same time, that's where that repetition and muscle memory and just situational awareness all have to meet at this perfect point. You know what I mean? To have greatness. Totally. That's exactly right. You got to be able to manage, 10 things at once, and also compartmentalize. I think that's what high athletes in any sport, and men are better at it than, I don't want to be derogatory, but men are better at it than women. I'm married. I can compartmentalize things very well. And as a high level athlete, that's where that's where I think the greatness comes out of, is compartmentalizing whatever's going on in your life or whatever you're dealing with, either off the bike, during the week, that day of. When you roll into that gate, your brain literally just shuts off, and you're focused on what you're doing. It doesn't matter what's happening. They could be dropping a nuclear bomb behind you, and you're focused on what's in front of you. Totally agree. Speaking of greatness and high-tuned athlete, let's talk about this run, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 4-time consecutive champ. To me, the one impressive thing about it, and I think it was 2013, maybe it was 12, you'll correct me. One of them, you had that bitch wrapped up with like 4 circuits to go.
Yep, 4 races to go. I think that was 12 or 13. I'd have to look back. 12 or 13, yeah. With, I think, 5 to go. It was the earliest ever wrapping up a 17 race series. I wrapped it up, I think, 5 to go.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, I was sitting there and I'm like, dude, let me make sure I read that right. Like, I went back and read it 3 times. I'm like, that's a freaking feat right there. That would be like winning the Super Bowl week 13 of the NFL season.
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's consistency, obviously a little bit of luck, and why, luck, call it, maybe a competitor crashes, maybe gets hurt, whatever the case may be. It's all everything's subject to you showing up and not worrying about anything else. And consistency is the biggest thing. 17 races in 18 weekends is very, very, very hard to show up at and perform at your utmost best at the highest level. That's what makes our sport so gnarly. So to do it to wrap it up 5 in a row was honestly, I just felt I was just because that wasn't my first. I would say my first 450 championship was probably the easiest, because easiest, but also hard too, because I had never done it, so I hadn't experienced everything through those 17 rounds. So that was hard, because it was there was a lot of unforeseen for myself, because I hadn't done it. Now Eldon had with previous guys, so he knew, and he was able to really guide me in the right direction there. But as an athlete, I had never done it before. But then I look back and say that was the easiest one, because now you win, and then you do 2011. 2012, and now you have a target on your back, and the pressure to maintain or to show up every year and keep winning. By 14, I was just like, I was so burnt out of living in that pressure cooker.
Yeah.
When am I going to lose? When is somebody going to beat me?
And that you're not only thinking that, that's what every announcer, every industry insider is like. That's the shit that's going around the pits is who's going to knock Ryan off? Who's it going to be? Who's taking down RV? You know what I mean? And at that point, you kind of get this little bit of thing too. I'm pretty sure the competitor and he's like, you know what? Fucking nobody is. I'm just going to keep trying to do it, because that's the only way when you're in that pressure cooker, you either fold to it, which let's look at the results. You sure as fuck did do that. But to keep, you're like, hey man, I'm not going to let anybody get ahead of me, and that's, but that's a tough existence.
It is. So I always consider this, and there's only there's only a handful of them and pull them all from every sport, a high level sport athlete. When you start at the bottom, you have all these people and all this, not help, it's the wrong word, but you have all this, you're working your way up the ladder. And as you get to the top of that mountain, right, you find out that like, when you get up there, it's like, you look around and you're like, fuck, I finally made it. And then you're like, well, now what? You got to repeat and you got to repeat and you got to repeat. And I ended up doing it 4 in a row. But at the end of it, it also is your mind always also will play even at a high level. And as good as I was, like you always, for whatever reason, question yourself. Can I keep doing this? Can I do this again? And that, like I said, it's like a mirage. Like, like you look and it's like, no, it's not real. And yes, you just won 3 championships in a row. Why can't you win a 4th one? And it's not that I didn't think I couldn't, but it, like I said, when you get up on the very top of that mountain, it also is, I don't want to say lonely, but lonely because nobody else is dealing with the things you're dealing with mentally.
Yep. No, I completely understand. Going back to 2011 real quick, and something I want to talk about here is, you were talking about when you got that opportunity with Elgin, $300,000, I'm going to make that investment. I think I can see how I pay it. But 2011, you ended up winning $1 million monster payday.
Monster Cup.
One, was that the biggest like add-on in the history of your sport at that time?
That was the biggest, and I
event, add-on, whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
event. So Monster Energy, current sponsor of myself right now. Probably should have their hat on, but it's all right. we were washing bikes and I jumped on and obviously it was a little late, but we're good. They put on a race out at Sam Boyd Stadium in Las Vegas, and they put $1 million up for grabs, and you had to win 3 motos in a row. In a typical Supercross, for fans that don't know or that are listening, we have a qualifying race and then we have a main event. So you only have one finale, call it one gate drop finale, let's call it one main event. Well, this one you had 3 main events and you had to be perfect all 3. And the hard part about that is you have 3 different gate drops, and our racing is really dependent on your start. Where do you start off of the gate? Meaning, how do you come around the first turn? If you're in the top 5, that's a pretty good start. If you're in the top 3, that's even better. If you hole shot, that's like the cherry on top. Well, I was able to win all 3 of them for $1 million that year, and that was the first time. And I want to say that was the biggest payout in any motorsports history to that point. Now I know there's some others out there that pay some, I think about around the same, but I believe, don't quote me, but I believe it at the time it was some of the biggest, or it was the biggest payday for a single event.
Proud sponsor of the show, Old Boy Apparel. When myself and Tim Montana started building this brand several years ago, we just wanted something that brought together all those people with that hard work ethic, that grit. Whether you be a musician, whether you're slinging barbecue, or just one of those blue-collar trades folks, we got an opportunity to partner up with Trollco, and we are really, really enjoying it. Go check out the apparel at trollcoclothing.com. Search Old Boy Apparel. And feel free to use my discount code, OldBoyPodcast, for 15% off. Now, did that happen before or after the actual championship? So is that something that happened after the season?
That was after the season. Yes, it was after the Supercross, after the motocross season. So we do Supercross first, then motocross, And then I think it was 4 weeks after motocross when you typically you're the 2 or 3 week downtime, which when I mean downtime is like you only have about 2 or 3 weeks of non-riding, non-training before you have to start your development, you're developing the new motorcycle or testing and getting yourself back in shape and all those things for the next season. We only have about a 2-week window of off time, like true off time.
Yep.
So when they threw that one in there, it extended the season or extended my riding by another 3 weeks. And it was good. It was a kind of the cherry on top. It was, you know, winning the Supercross championship and then coming out and winning that was pretty cool.
Well, and once again, you know, you were betting on yourself with making that investment in Elgin. And then, you know, boom, you hit something like this because of your work and how he had you prepared, you know, and I think that just goes back to when given the opportunity to invest in yourself, if you believe you can be successful, and that's a key cog of what you're missing, look at your ROI that you had just that 1 year.
Totally. I use that kind of philosophy now a bit, you know, like because the roles have changed in Ryan Villopoto on what I do today. I was the athlete. I was the guy that people were coming to pay me. Hey, wear this. Hey, do this. We'll pay you to do this. We'll pay you to show up here. We want you to wear this gear. We want you to ride this bike for the X amount of dollars, right? So now, as being retired, I think for almost 9 years, coming up on 9, I think. Like my whole role has and it has changed, right? Like I'm not the athlete. I'm an ex-athlete. So, you know, with the podcast and Yamaha, like I go to Colorado on Sunday for 4 days for a adventure ride, Tanneray 700. But just investing back into myself currently is what I'm doing, you know, like I'm just, you know, redoing my website, redoing a deck for myself and just, yes, it's costing me money. But you have to invest in yourself, and you have to invest in yourself. Even at the time when I decided to pay Eldon, you know, $300,000, like, I was like, that's a lot of money, but I'm like, dude, I can pay it off in 3 weekends if I perform, if I do what I know I can do.
Talk to me a little bit, because I went back and watched some of the recaps of the podcast, and you know, even as someone that, you know, I used to watch, you know, Bubba Stewart, you know, grew up here in Haines City, and so that was kind of for us the first, like, oh shit, you got to pay attention to this stuff, you know what I mean? And so, you know, I kept up with it, but like, listen to you and Ricky kind of go back and forth and recap, you know, the weekend before, what's going on in the industry. Even as someone that's not an industry guy, I found it very, very entertaining. And for you guys to be partnered with NBC Sports, and, you know, NBC Sports is now using Peacock as a platform to really get more racing out to folks, which I love to see. You know, what's that experience been like? You know,
honestly, it's been,
you guys are the second season, right?
Yep. Second season. It's been great. It keeps me involved. I'm a big fan of the sport. My kids watch it. So, myself and Ricky, we analyze after the weekend, and jump on for about an hour 20. It's NBC back, so we get all the footage. We have Aaron, our producer, from NBC that gets it all laid out for us. And I really enjoy it. I really do. It's like I said, I'm getting a podcast room set up, my trophy room set up. It'll be a trophy room bar podcast area up above my garage. So once again, investing in myself, you know, like I don't have to do that. I don't, you know, what you see right now in the background of our podcast, or Old Boy podcast right now, this is my little mudroom office. My garage is like literally this close to being done. And then we'll be moving up there. But, you know, I'm trying to, I want to look and feel and have that professional background, you know? So
sure.
But having NBC like backing us for the podcast is great, because myself and Ricky, it's you know, it keeps us busy. We have a lot of fun doing it, honestly.
Yeah, and there's something to be said too, like, you know, fortunate enough to have Jason and the Trollco folks that have invested in this podcast. And there's something to be said when you don't really have to, like, I can spend all my time like researching and thinking about guests and what I want to talk about and that kind of stuff, instead of worried about like, oh man, I got to cut up this short and get it on YouTube. Like, just being able to come in, cut on the lights, and do what I enjoy doing and think I'm pretty decent at. in taking all that other minutia away, I feel like it just makes you when you're talking about investing in yourself and those type of things, to me is, always be honest with yourself on what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. And those weaknesses that are holding you back, go find somebody that's a hell of a lot better than you at it and empower them.
Exactly. So surround yourself with good people and delegate what you're not good at. And let's be honest, I was a great athlete at Moto. And I'm a decent commentator or podcaster. But yeah, doing the back end stuff, doing all of that, like you said, the cutting, the hot takes, getting the content, like put that in somebody else's hand that's good at, so that that yourself or myself or whoever else is listening to this that's thinking about it, like then you can really shine and do what you're great at. I get it. I know there's guys out there, and sometimes you got to just strap the boots on and you got to wear 7 different hats at one time and juggle it. But when you get to a position where you can either afford it or it's time for that move to that next stage, like pass the baton off to where that somebody else can handle the stuff that you don't really like to do or don't want to do or don't have the time.
Yeah. Or just, it's not in your aptitude. It's just not your strength. Yes. And I think when you do that, it allows you more opportunities, more avenues, but also just lets you continue to sharpen that iron that you're really good at too, just more reps on things that you enjoy and you're good at.
Yeah, and I think also too, look at the big picture. Don't look at what's right in front of you, right? Like, oh God, if I hire this producer and I hire this and I hire that, well, now I'm either breaking even or I'm not making as much money. Yeah, but in 12 months, 24 months, especially with social, especially with podcasts, especially with these things that take time to build, like any business, like you will see it 10 times in the future. If you keep that trajectory. Yes, it might be a little less in your pocket currently, but you got to look at the big picture, right? So that's what I always try to do.
One of the things that always gets brought up to me with my background in barbecue and competing in barbecue, and we have sponsors there and this and that. How do you select sponsors? How do you work with sponsors? And one of the things that I always think is interesting is just because you're associated with something for a certain amount of period doesn't mean that there aren't other opportunities out there. And I know for you rode Kawasaki the majority, I believe, your whole career.
Whole career.
Yeah. So then as this retirement, comes along and happens, and you start kind of settling into, what's Ryan look like, from here on out, you do a partnership with Yamaha. And I think a lot of it was because riding Ryan, Kawasaki was a great fit. Retired analyst, podcaster, guy in the industry, Ryan, it seemed like Yamaha, just from looking at your socials, like some of the cool shit you guys do and the way you get people together from the industry, like why would you not want to be a part of that? Well, was that a bit of where that decision came in?
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. Like I had was Kawasaki my entire career, and then I actually had I had 24 months where I moved back to my hometown, and I always tell people, like as a kid I thought the fish was this big, but when I really moved back at 30 years old, it was actually this big. So it lasted a short time. Weather was shitty, so I moved back to Southern California, and at that time, me and Kawasaki had parted ways, and then I'm like, shit, who am I going to partner myself with? And it can't be just anybody. And the reason why I say it can't just be anybody is because I don't do good with, I want to hang around and be around people that I like. And it's not just I have money in the bank, so I have the opportunity to make this decision and make the proper decision, because I don't have to do something based on revenue, based on what I need, because I have enough. Right. So now I was kind of looking around, and I actually rode Yamaha, and I was a Yamaha athlete early on in my 7 through 11. I was actually a Yamaha guy. So I hit the guys up at Yamaha from marketing, and I said, hey, I got twin boys. They're riding PWs. I'm looking for a new gig. What do let's sit down and brainstorm and figure out how you can use me. And it actually worked out perfect. I actually I went more under the marketing group for, which is great for me because now I can do 4-wheel stuff side by side. The R-Max that Yamaha has is awesome. The Tanneray 700, obviously all the street applications that they have, and let alone some of the best dirt bike 450, 250 motorcycles, and that's in my wheelhouse right there. So we've been partnered now for I think coming up on 6 years.
That's awesome.
And honestly, it's been the best experience, and the people I work with. It took us a little bit because I signed my deal with them, and then it was COVID, and then 24 months of kind of like some shitty time, and not getting to know anybody because nobody could get together type thing. And there was no events going on. And then by year 3, we started kind of hitting our stride, and now it's just I did a Yamaha event the other day, 2 weeks ago up at Glen Helen. And we had a Q&A, and they asked, a kid had asked me like, well, what was the transition to Yamaha, and asked me, that. And I'm like, honestly, I was like, this is like family. Like, this is what we do now, and the relationship I've built with them is I couldn't ask for more, is what I said, and it truly is. Like, I honestly believe that this is where, they have everything that I like to do. Yamaha's into hunting. I like to hunt. Yamaha's into fishing. I like to fish. Yamaha's into, obviously the dirt bike side, the 4-wheel side. So they have applications for me, and that I get to jump into every so often. And I just love it.
Well, it just sounds like it's the right fit at the right time in your life, and knowing you grew up on Yamahas from 7 to 11, how can you not sit there and smile when you look at your two boys, riding on a Yamaha, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. I still have, I have actually, I did a Supercross race on a YZ85 back in, I think 2002. I still have that bike. My dad kept it, and I'm going to put it in my trophy room. So that'll be a cool memorabilia piece. Yeah, absolutely.
One more thing, in looking back at your career, I know numerous years you got to compete for Team USA. What did that feel like? What did that feel like representing your country? In the sport that you love, and at the time, were dominating.
Dude, it's I'm sure it's just like any stick and ball sport, or any sport that goes for the Olympics. I consider, and I will tell this and say it over and over, Motocross of Nations is our Olympics. And it is the equivalent to the Olympics, just on a little smaller scale, obviously. But yeah, I got to go, I think it was 3 times, and I was lucky enough to win all, Team USA was won all 3 times we went.
Wow.
I think two, actually it might've been 4 times. One was in Budds Creek, Maryland. And then we had 2 in England and 1 in France. And if anybody's listening that wants to experience an event like this, Motocross of Nations is one you have to go to, especially in Europe, man. They bring out the chainsaws, they bring out the air horns. There's, 80, 90, 100,000 fans that are just die-hard motocross fans. And, Team USA, and every team for that matter, brings over 3 riders. They bring over a 250 rider, and they bring over two 450 riders.
Wow.
And you each ride 6 motos, but there's actually only 3, so you double up, right? So the 250 guy would ride the first moto, 250 guy would ride the second moto with the first 450 guy, and then the 250 guy's done, and then that. So long story short, it is an experience of a lifetime, and I was lucky enough to be able to go 4 times and win all 4 times. So it's a very, very highlight of my career.
No, that's super cool, and to get to travel all over. And I always find it interesting too, like some of these American things that when they get brought over to Europe is just wild. Like football, and like I remember, back in the day when Guns N' Roses and Metallica and those bands were like super hot. They thought it was a big deal to sell out 80,000 here, but they would sell out 120, 130,000 in Europe. Like it's interesting. And then just to go over and feed off of a whole other fan base, that has to be pretty exhilarating. And just one of those moments where you kind of look around and go, fuck it, kind of did it, kind of did it.
Yeah, totally agree with you. It's we have great fans here in the U.S., but when you head over the pond and head over to Europe, they truly are on another level. And the other thing that makes that race so special is, I talked about 17 rounds and trying to be consistent for 17 rounds and living in that pressure cooker for 17 weekends. This is like 17 weekends wrapped up all in 2 days. Seriously, you go over there, American. You're an American. Let's face it.
It is all white knuckle for 2 days.
Want to manhandle us and show that they're better than we are, and vice versa. We want to go to their territory and show them that we're the best. And we have a lot of wins as America in general for that race. And I was lucky enough to win 4 times for us.
Yeah, that is so cool. That is really awesome. It has to be just another thing that, like, just at the top of that, career accomplishments.
Yep. No, it is.
The talk to me about, and then we're close to wrapping up here, but I'm curious because, we've talked about 2011 through 2014, and then 2015 happens. And it's like, man, next thing you know, you were on top of the game, and now you're working your way out of the game due to injury. Like, that has to be just such a roller coaster of emotions to deal with. Like, how do you work through that? And how do you come to that final decision and not like, oh, well, maybe if I take a year and a half off and work on getting this better or work on getting that better? Like, how did all that come about? And like, what was the thought process?
Yeah. So I 14 wrapped up Supercross, and, I was cooked. I burnt the candle at both ends for 4 years in a row. And why I say, but also from literally 5 years old, right? So
yes.
to 27. So yes, as a professional, it was only about an eight years or so, about 8-9 years. But if you look at the grand scale of things, doing that since I was 5 years old, I was cooked. And, I never had the opportunity to switch teams. And I think if I would have had the opportunity to switch teams, and why I said I never had the opportunity was the money wasn't even close. And I would have been okay with a pay cut from leaving Cowie to somewhere else, but not a fraction of what I was currently making.
Yeah.
Right. So, and Cowie was great to me my whole career. So, there was no option really for me to retire. There was nowhere else to go with similar money. So, and why I say that is if I would have switched, new team, new goals, see if I can win a championship on a new bike. Also, my mentality, I've been with those guys at Kawasaki from 16 years old all the way up to the end of my career. When you switch teams at, say, 25, 26-year-old, you're a young man. Your mentality's different. Mentally, you're different. You're I don't want to say dictator, but you can dictate more things, and how you want things ran, more than where I currently was, because I hate to say it, they kind of looked at me as a kid still, because they developed me from such a young age. Even though I was Ryan Villopoto, champion, 26 years old, we still had this like playful, fun relationship, which I still have today, which I love with the guys over at Kawasaki. But yeah, I made the decision to retire. And at first it really wasn't that hard. I was cooked. So then I kind of started thinking, I was like, okay, well, I still had another year on my contract for all of 15. So MXGP, which is in Europe, I threw out the idea of going over and racing MXGP for a season over in Europe and travel the world over there. And that's when I ended up breaking my tailbone, I think round 3 of that series. And also it was kind of a blessing in disguise. My head wasn't in it. And when you do this sport, you got to be fully engulfed in it, so that, because the injury rate's so high and the speeds are so high, and you got to be razor sharp. So I ended up doing 3 rounds. I won, an American hadn't won in a very, very long time. I won an overall in Thailand. which was amazing to hear the national anthem up on the world stage like that in Thailand was epic. And then in next round, I ended up getting hurt. So and then I came back to the US, came back home. I will say this, I don't have any regrets on my decision of retiring when I retired. I will say that guys that do retire from, probably anything, but I can only speak for my sport we had a guy just currently retiring out of our industry around the same age as me, 26, I think 27. And what you realize is, and I only realize this now because I'm older and because I've dealt with it, is, you think the grass is greener on the other side, but when you're currently in the current situation that I was in or this rider was in, is the grass is manicured, watered, fertilized, all by your team, by your wife, by your girlfriend. You have all these people manicuring and making this grass look so green. When you retire, the first 12 to 24 months, it's like, dude, it's like you're in a frat house, right? Like you have no responsibility. You're 26 years old, 27 years old. You got a bank full of cash and no responsibilities. The first time in your life that you haven't had responsibilities, because we have responsibilities from 5 years old, going to race, competing. Everybody wants you to win. You got to go over here. You got to fly here. You got to do this. And we deal with this from such a young age. So literally, like, I relived my high school years at 27 years old.
Hey, with a whole lot more money in the bank account, which makes it even more fun.
Exactly. So that's kind of cool. But what you realize after the time of all of that is if you don't manicure your own lawn, if you don't fertilize it, if you don't water it after those 12 to 24 months, or whenever the lull is after the retirement, right? Whenever you hit that low point, you're like, fuck, my grass is dead. Well, now that's kind of when you got to not reinvent yourself, but that's where I for myself, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now? That was kind of like the Yamaha thing. That was being back involved in the sport, because I kind of thought at one time I didn't want anything to do with it. I was so cooked.
Yep.
I was so burnt out on it. But that 24 months went by, and I'm like, dude, I built something, and I did things that only a small few can do.
Yep.
So why not reap the benefits of that in the retired life, inside of this? So that's what you see now. That's what you see of Ryan Villopoto but you got to manicure you got to do your own grass. You got to do the maintenance. You got to do the fertilizer. You got to do the water. So it's just a different mentality. You got to stop and think and say, okay, well, this was all done for me before. Now you kind of have to do it. And that's also the investment in yourself too. Investing in yourself. So.
Absolutely. Well, hey, and it looks like it's all working out, Ryan. It looks like it's working out really, 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 really well. And I want to thank you so much for the discussion today. This has been awesome. And as things go on and you get more things going on, I'd love to have you back on and give the listeners an update and just catch up again. But, real quick before we wrap up, you got one or two guys, after kind of going through the Old Boy podcast experience, you got one or two guys you'd maybe recommend we reach out to and try to bring on the show?
Let me see here. I'd like to let me think about that. I want to get you somebody that's good, that you would jive with, that also has got good stories.
Yes, sir.
Let me think about that, and I'll get back to you on that. I've been going through my own head about all this other stuff, just I'm saying with podcasts, things like that, and I haven't thought about that. You put me on the spot, bro.
No worries, man. No worries. You can definitely follow up on that. And then before we wrap up, tell everybody where they can get the podcast at, keep up with you on everything else. I know you said you have the website you're working on getting redesigned, just wherever people can be part of the Ryan world, let them know.
Yeah. Go over to Instagram, Ryan Villopoto. RB2.com is the website. That'll be up here, revamped here very shortly. As for Title 24, you can listen to it or watch it on YouTube, Peacock, also Apple. Also, we're pretty much on every platform where you listen to, or any fans listen to podcasts. You can get us pretty much anywhere. But I always like to go on and if you haven't listened to us ever, go on YouTube and type in Title 24. That way you can actually get the full scope of it. You get to watch it, get the replays. Then you can get on the podcast and really listen to the podcast when you're driving. Just to educate, like I said, if you haven't followed Supercross a ton, it's good to get over on the YouTube side of it, watch it, and then get over to Peacock and get over to Amazon and Apple and download it for your trips and drives.
Love it, man. Well, hey, thank you so much for the time, Ryan. I really, really appreciate it. And listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of the Old Boy Podcast. And until the next one, you guys take care. Be safe. Thank you so much for listening to the Old Boy Podcast. Please subscribe, like, set your notifications, whatever you got to do to make sure you're getting the latest episodes. Also, feel free to go back, whether it be YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Get some of the past episodes, check those out, and always feel free to check out our socials, Old Boy Podcast. Thank you so much.